I met my wife when we were just 17 in a small town in North Texas. We both came from humble backgrounds and dreamed of a brighter future. We fell in love, got married, and when our first son came into the world, we decided it was time to move closer to a bigger town to give our family a better shot at a good life. I have always been more of an introvert, content with a quiet evening at home, while she's the complete opposite. She's extroverted, quick-witted, and a joy to be around. She made friends effortlessly, and I couldn't help but admire her for it. I was working 12-hour days in unskilled labor, but I would come home and help with everything. I would change diapers, prepare bottles, and try my best to keep the house in order. It was a relentless cycle of work, but I was determined to provide for my family. Despite all the overtime I put in, it still wasn't enough. The cost of living was high, and it was becoming increasingly difficult for a family of 3 to make ends meet on a single income. We tightened our belts and cut expenses wherever we could, but it was a constant struggle. When he turned 4 months old, she decided to start working at a manufacturing facility, assembling vehicle parts. It was a huge relief financially, but it meant even more work for me around the house. She would spend long hours at the factory, and I would pick up the slack, making sure our son was fed, bathed, and put to bed. As she made new friends at her job, things started to change. They would occasionally go out to bars after work, and it took an emotional toll on our family. I saw that it was causing stress in our relationship. I told her many times to come straight home because we have a young child, but she kept doing the same, meeting friends after work. I knew she was very social, and she seemed happier when she spent time with her friends. So I decided to let it go, to keep the peace, and try to contribute more at home. Our intimate life suffered, and sometimes we were lucky to be intimate once a month. Sometimes we almost forgot that it had been a while. However, we seemed to get along fine, and we didn't argue. After my wife had been working at her job for around 6 months, I received a message from a fake Facebook account. It told me that she was having a relationship with a man from her workplace. He is a Black American, and that would be important later in the story. I couldn't believe it. The message also had a link to the man she was involved with. I felt devastated. Suddenly, everything made sense to me. Why she was coming home late from work. I was angry that she had left me and our baby at home to be with someone else. When she returned home that night, I confronted her about the Facebook message. She admitted it was true. It turned out she had been going to him after work, and the affair had been happening for about 2 months. We had a really big fight, and we said a lot of hurtful things to each other. It seemed like she was angrier about someone revealing her affair from work than feeling sorry for hurting our family. That night, she slept in the living room, and I stayed in the bedroom in our tiny apartment. I will always remember that night because our baby cried all night, and I couldn't get any sleep. My job was physically demanding, and I needed a good amount of sleep. I still went to work, exhausted, because I couldn't afford to miss work since we were barely making ends meet. The day after, while she was at work, I heard things got pretty heated because she suspected who had sent the message to me. There were a lot of women working there, so it turned into a big argument with different groups forming. The Black and the Mexican women were on one side, and the white women were on the other side. She had mentioned this division to me before, but I didn't realize it involved some actual dynamics as well. It turned into a real drama, and everyone in the company found out about it. The company was already short-staffed, and they didn't want to fire anyone when they heard about the conflict. So they decided to send everyone home and warn them to leave any personal conflict outside of work. She wanted to repair our relationship, but I found it hard to trust her again, even though we have known each other for a long time. I was still hurt and angry because of her betrayal, and I didn't want her around. So she decided to live with a friend for a while. As time passed, we both realized that being overworked had taken a toll on our relationship, so it had played a significant role in our breakup. When she left to stay with her friend, it became nearly impossible to share parental responsibilities. After a month of being apart, we decided to try and work things out. She told me that she was committed to fixing our relationship, and as a condition for her return to our apartment and work on our relationship, she went no contact with her affair partner and quit her job. It didn't take her long to find a new job, and she moved back in. Things seemed to return to normal, but I never fully trusted her again. I always kept an eye on her. She behaved better and interacted less with people at work, which made me believe she had learned her lesson. I couldn't say that I trusted her as much as I used to, because I now know what she was capable of doing. She made a real effort to earn my trust back. She started doing more around the house and come home early from work. I kept a close watch on her phone and social media accounts, but I didn't see any sign of her being in contact with her affair partner. So I began to let my guard down. We fell into a routine, discussing ways to improve our family financial situation. We decided that I should enroll in a trade school to become a master plumber, hoping it would increase our earning potential. As I juggled school and part-time work with household chores when I got home, our schedules became hectic and we had less time for each other. Still, we maintained a physical relationship, and it didn't come as a surprise when she got pregnant. She was on the heavier side, which made it take 2 months for her to realize she was pregnant. When we got the news, we were excited, but I couldn't help but worry about the added financial strain on our family. It meant we had to work even harder. The thought that the pregnancy might not be mine did come across my mind, but I had no evidence to support it, and our relationship seemed to be going smoothly. Fast forward a few months from our early struggles, when my wife was 9 months pregnant with our second child. Despite the hardships we faced, we had come a long way, and I was determined to put the past behind us. I was nervous, though, about the prospect of having another child. The weight of responsibility and financial worries pressed down on me. However, she assured me that we would make it work. As we entered the labor room, I couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and anxiety. The memories of our first childbirth experience were vivid, but this time I was better prepared. Her grip on my hand was firm, and her determination shone through as she went through the labor pains. The atmosphere in the labor room was tense as the contraction grew more intense. She was in the throes of pain, and I was right there by her side, offering words of encouragement and support. But then, the unexpected happened. As the baby finally emerged, my heart skipped a beat when I saw the child. This little one had a different skin tone, noticeably mixed, which didn't match mine or hers. Panic surged through me, and I couldn't keep my shock to myself. "This can't be my child," I blurted out. The room fell into an eerie silence as the medical staff exchanged puzzled glances. Her eyes filled with tears, and her apology gaze met mine. The tension in the room was palpable as everyone was trying to make sense of what just happened. I couldn't control my emotions. I was overwhelmed with confusion, anger, and a deep sense of betrayal. All that was going on my mind at that time was how could this have happened, only to conclude that she had never stopped seeing her affair partner. The realization that my wife had been unfaithful hit me like a sledgehammer, and I couldn't bear to stay in that room any longer. I turned and walked out, my own tears blurring my vision. Outside the door, I leaned against the wall, trying to process the whirlwind of emotion that had just crashed over me. Her apologies echoed in my mind, but the damage had been done. Our world had been shattered, and I was left to pick up the pieces of our once happy and loving family. The days following the shocking moments in the labor room were a blur, filled with heartache and confusion. I never returned to the hospital. Instead, I left her in the care of her mother and sister, who came to take her belongings from our apartment. I couldn't bear to face her at that point. The betrayal and shock were just too raw. She moved back home to her parents' place and took her mixed-race child with her. For the next month, I heard nothing from her. She didn't call to apologize, and she didn't ask about our 2-year-old son, who was left in my care. It was a tough and challenging period, trying to balance raising a young child while working to make ends meet. I had to make the painful decision to drop out of trade school. Even though I was just a few months into starting my apprenticeship, the financial burden and the emotional turmoil made it impossible to focus on my studies. My main priority was providing for my son and ensuring his well-being. Months passed, and as I was beginning to come to terms with the idea of filing for divorce and seeking custody of my son, she reached out to me. She apologized, explaining that her shame and guilt had kept her away. She wanted to talk about the affair that led to the birth of her mixed-race child, but I knew enough. I had no desire to dive into the sordid details. One thing she proposed, though, was an amicable divorce. We agreed that we didn't have the funds to hire lawyers. The financial burden was already crushing us, and it made sense to avoid adding costly legal fees to the mix. We agreed to work through the process as peacefully as possible, with the well-being of our son as our top priority. The road ahead remained uncertain, but at least we had made the first step toward a resolution that would hopefully allow me to share responsibility of my child and continue my education. Probably would never forget this pain, but my focus right now is to finalize the divorce and share custody of my son to give me the time to go back to school and finish so I can start earning more money. Thank you for staying till the end of this story. Please support the channel by liking and subscribing. Also, let me get your reaction to this story on the comment section. Thank you and have